Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Investing Book Club podcast with your hosts, Chris and Mike.
Hi, welcome back to the Real Estate Investing Book Club podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Davison, and we have
Mike Lynn.
Good deal. Thanks for joining us today. We're covering one of my favorite books back in the day, influential business books. It's written by Kim Blanchard and Spencer Johnson, The 1 Minute Manager. This is how I try to manage and help folks. What's interesting about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting to me is this isn't a management textbook in traditional sense, but it's just a good framework of communication. And the entire book is the premise that a young man speaks or is trying to search for what the perfect manager is. And the whole book is almost a conversation. And it's a conversation around management. Management styles. Yeah.
And what I like is giving kind of a format. When I first got started as a manager, instead of just reading a list of theories, I kind of had some things to look out for and watchful for someone discovering these ideas naturally. So for me, I found that beneficial when I was first getting started in management.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I had mentioned before, it's a story with parables, almost lessons woven into the story. And I think that's the reason why it sold millions of copies and it's still recommended today, decades after it was written.
Yeah, I agree. So I think why this book still matters, and you brought up a good point, is the book stayed relevant for so long. Why do you think that is though, Mike? Why?
People. Managing, it has to do with conversations with people, and people don't change, although technology changes, business change, but people remain the same. So whether you're doing a good job, people would like to receive input of whether they're doing a good job or a bad job. And ultimately everybody would like to do their best and improve. Yeah.
And I think sometimes I like this book too. He talked about positive feedback or constructive criticism. I really enjoyed that. But I think what you said, people don't change. That's a great point. So most management books I've read become outdated because of theories, especially because of like trends and also because they focus on human behavior, but really because of terminology too. So I know a lot of that we get hung up in a lot of different management theories and books. I'm going to date myself here a little bit, Mike. The Six Sigma theory on management, all these things. But I think this book, it really talks about human behavior. That's why I liked it.
Yeah. Whether you're managing people and leading people in the military, managing a construction crew, or running a real estate company, people respond to clarity, appreciation, and accountability.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think about kids too. Kids really appreciate accountability. They really appreciate schedule, what to expect. And I think most of us are like that. So let's jump into it today and get started with the first principle, the 1 minute goals. Mike, let me hear your take on that.
I think the most overlooked lesson in this entire book, 1 minute goals. The manager creates goals.
Yeah.
And it's important for feedback. And so just as the book makes a comparison of bowling, it's hard to be a successful bowler if you can't see your bowling pins that you're targeting.
I think that's a good point. A lot of people have, they might know the goal or where the target is, the manager, but then the employees don't. I think that's an issue. So I think they're written together. I think they're written down. They're specific and measurable. I think these things are really important about goals. They can be read in about 1 minute and the employee helps create the goals. That's really important. And performance is compared against the goal and not against the manager's mood. And I think for a lot of managers, they do get moody. I'm not going to talk about bad experiences, but hey, they certainly can. So Mike, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think exactly. It's important that the employee helps create the expectation instead of simply being handed a set of rules or tasks.
Why do you think that's important, Mike? I'm just curious why you think that.
I believe it's important because it gives people buy-in. If I sit down with a property manager and together we can define clearly what success looks like, I think we're more likely to meet those expectations than if I simply went and emailed you our company policy or what we're looking to target for revenue.
Yeah. I think so many companies do that. Those goals should be clear enough to read in about a minute. I think that's really important.
Again, the acronym that it's universal is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
And I need that for myself. And I really appreciated this as I was getting into management. I just didn't knew enough to know that what the job would be, but how to manage people on the job was something new and different for me. So for me, this really helped keep it simple.
To keep reviewing your goals consistently.
Well, obviously, it's the Real Estate Investing Book Club podcast. Let's get into a real estate example. Let's make this practical. Say you hire a new leasing assistant. Well, how would you do this, Mike? What would you do to how to help her?
Sure. And so if I had an assistant, instead of saying answer the phones and help tenants, you could create measurable goals saying, return every phone call within 1 business day, respond to maintenance requests within 4 hours, have completed lease paperwork within 24 hours of approval.
Yeah.
Things like that.
I think that's good. It just gets rid of the guessing. So you just kind of get rid of the ambiguity and things and what you're looking for. So, all right, some praises, some things I liked about the book. Second principle is my favorite, the 1 minute praises, probably because my love language is appreciation, that kind of thing. So for me, that's good. I know why I do, but why do you think it's so important to give praises, give good feedback?
Unfortunately, so many people, especially in a professional environment, are quick to address negative behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So just the other side of that coin is addressing positive behaviors.
Yeah.
So we can still make sure that clarity is there and move towards those our previously stated goals, whatever they may be.
Yeah, I think that's real important. I think one thing is highlighted well in this book was the manager to catch people doing something right. I mean, I think about one of our favorite books, How to Win Friends, Influence People. To me, I didn't have people skills before I read that book. So one of the things he says is, you do something wrong, you hear it ever. You do something right, you hear it never. And that really stuck with me. I know I like appreciation. And I think a lot of things, even training animals, they give good reward behavior. I think that's super important. So
give them treats.
Yeah. And I think important too is doing it immediately. I think that's one of the things you're going to touch about, but doing it immediately and not during an annual 6-month review later, it's just not as effective. I mean, they're probably going to forget about it. So
Yeah, praise has to be connected to the behavior in that moment.
Yeah.
Just as your animal example, if a dog does something incorrectly or well, I think it's very important that they know in that instance that you're reinforcing that behavior that you're looking for.
Yeah. And I think that's good. This brings up another point, and I'm guilty of this. So I'm glad this book is something I love, but it's easy to forget, is I would go around the job sites to the guys and say, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. Thanks for your hard work. And one guy called me out on it one day. I remember he was like, it's BS. I go, what do you mean? Because you're just full of BS. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, I appreciate what you're doing. He was doing some hardwood floors for me, younger guy. And I think he had a chip on his shoulder. But long story short, he said I was just giving a vague, like, attaboy or good job, when really I need to be specific. And that brings up, I should have said, hey, that flooring looks good. The kitchen looks good. You already did the kitchen floor. It looks good. And you're doing a good job in the living room. I should have said that versus just, hey, I appreciate you or good job. And it was nice. It was kind when I was doing that. My heart was definitely in the right place. But instead of just saying that, specific, it definitely needs a lot more. What do you think about that, Mike?
Definitely. Just as this is a real estate focused podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to a real estate example. Just we were talking before about, hey, contact a tenant back within 4 hours of a service call, for example. So instead of saying, hey, good job to an assistant that's working for you, be very specific with that. And you could say, for example, I noticed how professional you handled that difficult tenant without escalating the situation. And like our metrics before, we clearly outlined that clearly reinforces immediately what that person did correctly.
And that's totally invaluable. I think if you can do that and you can do it as part of your conversation, it's invaluable. And it's just going to reinforce that person to do it again next time. That's a great point, Mike. So I immediately thought about contractors as we're talking about this, because that's who I am. And that kind of ring a bell for you as well, Mike.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think if a contractor finishes a rehab ahead of schedule, most investors just pay the invoice. But man, what could you do different, Mike, besides just paying the invoice?
For example, you could say, hey, I really appreciated that you finished the job 2 days earlier, and the communication has made a huge difference. And keeping me updated throughout this whole project has really made the difference.
I think that's key. It's a small thing you did. Maybe it took 30 minutes, seconds to a minute, but now they know exactly why they're valuable and why they feel valued. So I think that's good.
Yeah, I think that what we're looking for to have them repeat that on the next project.
Yeah. And so let's talk about real estate. Let's get into tenants. I even thought about this for tenants. And then here's something I thought about, Mike, was maybe it's interesting. How often does a landlord call a tenant simply to thank them for taking care of the property? I've thought about this for particular tenants that do a good job. I really do, especially about decorating, cleanliness, the yard. It's easy to call somebody and complain about parking in the grass and give them, a citation for it. But I think it's easier to say, hey, it's not as easy to say, hey, thanks for taking care of the property. So how many times do you think most people do that, Mike?
Almost never. It's never happened to me, but I think it's very valuable. 1 minute praise.
Yeah. I think most communication can be negative when it comes to tenant landlord situations, but praise must be given, not hollow praise. And I say you can look, and if you really get creative, you can look for anything and you can find something to praise for. What do you think about that, Mike?
Definitely. I think I've been guilty of this for sure.
Yeah.
We really, for example, being very specific. So if we're renewing a lease with a tenant, again, being very specific, we could say, for example, we really appreciate how well you maintained the home over the past year. And again, I think that opens communication. So if there is a problem, maybe they're more likely to reach out and a more effective, calm way with you.
Yeah.
It goes both ways.
Yeah. I definitely think you're hitting on a key thing there is that's relationship building. I mean, if you're going to have incremental rent increases every year, ideally you should be doing that, or at least looking at doing that, depending on the situation in your locale. But how much nicer is it to offer a rent increase with you saying you appreciate how well they maintain the home and how nice it is? It sucks. They got to pay more in rent regardless on their situation, but how much more does that go when you're able to give them a compliment doing so? So I totally agree with that. So, all right. So here's some things Mike talked about, some redirects in the book and some things with people and managing. I want you to jump into that, Mike. What'd you think about that part?
Yeah. In this book, a 1 minute redirect, maybe in layman's terms, it would be called in other terms, maybe a negative praise or addressing a problem. So 1 minute manager calls these 1 minute redirects.
Yeah. I think sometimes it can be the hardest thing for managers to do. Some people don't like conflict. Most people, my understanding is 2/3 to 75% of Americans do not like any form of conflict. So with that being said, I think a redirect, obviously, and letting them know it's a redirection would definitely be helpful to help people. So
yeah, this book is the second edition. So in the first edition of this book, this chapter, 1 minute redirect, was actually called a 1 minute reprimand.
Yeah.
So people are people. And I guess over the years of conversation and really looking at what works and what doesn't, this has changed in the second edition, which we're going over to a 1 minute redirect.
I actually like the new wording better, but I'm kind of on the border of, I always describe it in this kind of time frame. This book was originally written. There was a lot of X style management and Y style management is what I call it, Mike, and maybe being a military background, being an 80, Mike. X management is you get an order and you do it because you're told to. I think a lot of people, I think a lot of the newer generations is the more Y style management. You got to tell them why to do it, or you got to ask them to do it. And I think this book kind of leans into kind of both of them, but we're definitely heading towards more of the why. And this book is kind of on the verge of that. So I think this is kind of new information, but so some of that wording I think was important. So what do you think about the wording in particular? You said, Mike, you like it more of its benefit?
I agree. I think second edition to 1 minute redirect is better. Again, the goal being it's not punishment. It's just getting somebody on track to the original stated and written goals that we're both on board with.
Yeah, one thing I noticed was the order of how it went. I mean, what did you think about that?
Yeah, it's a quick, structured format of communication. So address the behavior immediately, explain why it matters, pause, then remind the person that you still believe it.
I think that pause is real important because now you're transitioning. I always call it like a transmission and gear in a car. So you said, hey, what you need to say about the behavior, good or bad. And now we're going to go into, hey, this is what I think, and you want to reinforce that. So I describe it as a transmission. And I think people need that. If you just say, hey, I didn't like yesterday, you took too long of a lunch, but you're doing a good job with your word processing. You know what I mean? I'm thinking word processing. Now I'm really showing how old I am. But if you can pause, that pause is important. I think a lot of people need that. So the last step is one of the most forgotten. What do you think the last steps he had in there, Mike?
Just to stop criticizing after that mistake. Once it's addressed, move on.
Yeah.
And again, having those clearly written out goals that we're both on the same page is enough.
Yeah.
It just goes back to addressing the mistake immediately, and then that's it. Address it, pause, go over the format we just explained, and then move on.
Yeah, I think that's good. In real estate terms, let's just say your property manager forgets to follow up on a major maintenance issue. I've done that. I'm guilty of that. I know a lot of people are. What would be a way you address that, Mike?
Well, we could say, for example, we missed this repair, and that's not acceptable because it affects the tenant's experience.
I like it. Then what would you say, Mike? I'm just curious what you do next. Just curious.
Then I would remind them why I hired them. For example, you could say, I know you're capable of handling these situations. Let's talk about how we can prevent them happening again.
Yeah. I think two things I like a lot about it. You said we, so like, hey, we're both in this boat. We're both in it together. You may be rowing it right now and I'm not rowing it, but we're both in the boat. I like that. So now it's a we situation versus you didn't do this. And then obviously reminding them. I think that's real important because now you're kind of bringing it back up. You're not directly challenging them. You're just reminding them just some things they talked about earlier. So I think that's really good. To me, that's really good correcting behavior without attacking the individual. And so many people just get the best word to put it, my butt hurt these days, Mike. I think you would agree. Yeah. And they just don't want to own things. We had some situations we were talking about recently with some property managers not owning things continually and how it just wears you out versus just saying, hey, yeah, I did that or I didn't do it and just own it. It's just so much easier. But most people do not want to own that kind of stuff. So let's talk about some self-managing people. I think this is a good concept. I don't think it gets enough attention is that manager wants people managing themselves. Why do you think that's important, Mike?
The ultimate goal isn't creating employees who constantly need supervision. It's creating people who know what success looks like and they hold themselves accountable.
Yeah. I think this really, we got to kind of get a definitive factor who we're talking to here. These are people that are already motivated, that want to show up for work every day. They're going to give 100%, if not close to that every day. So that's what we're talking about. Not people that you have to get out of bed, not people that miss work regularly, not people who don't care about the company or doing a job. So I think that's what we're talking about. People who are motivated and they do have a mental mindset. And that's really where scalability comes from, is having those kind of people on your team and working with you.
Yeah, exactly. Every successful real estate business eventually reaches the point where the owner can't touch every file or do every repair or call every tenant.
Yeah.
So you need to rely on others.
Yeah. Let's talk about some things where the book was great, but it's not so great. I mean, it falls short. Let's be fair. What didn't you like, Mike? I want to have you be the naysayer, if that's all right.
Absolutely. I am a naysayer and I'm a contrarian. I'm generally a contrarian. So this book is intentionally simple, which is, I think, it's one of its biggest strengths as well as it's one of its biggest weaknesses.
Yeah.
So I think this book automatically assumes that the manager is always right.
Yeah.
I get that if you're paying somebody's salary and you own the company, but in a bigger organization with middle managers, I can see how could this be very problematic.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I like the fact that we're niching down to real estate. That's what we're talking about. It doesn't teach hiring, doesn't teach compensation, doesn't teach organizational structure or when someone may need to be fired or not contracted. I mean, obviously there's some good books. We can get into all these things. But what I would say is with somebody, my simple rule, Mike, when somebody needs fired, it's better to have 24 hours of pain and to fire them than to have 6 months of pain and nobody's happy. So that's just kind of a side note for me. But what else did you think in here? Some things we're looking at.
Building systems from scratch. I think there wasn't so much of that. It wasn't a topic some talked about. So this is a shorter book. So that's just a knock of mine.
Yeah, so I guess the book assumes, correct me if I'm wrong, you're already hired someone. Now it's teaching you how to lead them is kind of what we're looking at. And for someone who doesn't have that kind of skill set, I think it's important. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, so yeah, I would too. So I give the big things I took away from it, which I liked. We'll get into that here. If someone finishes this book today, what's the first thing they should do, you think, Mike?
Write down clear expectations for every person on the team.
Yeah.
That's number one.
100%. And then one of my books, favorite management books, is Traction. And they talk about, everybody has a number. And I really like that. If it's a receptionist, how many calls is she taking? If it's somebody in sales, how many sales are they making? If it's a leasing agent, how many applications is she getting? How many showings? How many leases is she signing? There's numbers associated with everything. For me, it's scaling my portfolio, how many doors. For Mike, it might be a certain amount of money coming in per month for cash flow. So mine would be catching someone doing something right during the week. That'd be real important for me in this book. And then don't wait and tell them specifically what they did well. I think that's real important. I try to do difficult conversations in person whenever necessary. If you have bad news, face-to-face is the way to do it. If it's praise, I like to do it in front of other people if at all possible. If not, and you want to do it right now, sometimes this day and age, text, I really prefer a phone call. But if not, I definitely want at all possible do it in front of others, but definitely face-to-face as well. But always get bad news face-to-face, almost always. And then if it's good news, you want to get them face-to-face or over the phone. So final thoughts, Mike. What's your rating on this? You give it how many houses? 1 out of 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. How many would you give out of this, Mike?
So I give this book 3 out of 10.
Man, that hurts my heart. I chose this book and I thought it would be good. Mike was not a big fan. So what do you think? Why is that, Mike? I'm just curious.
Sure. Again, I'm a contrarian.
Yeah.
So both authors hold advanced degrees, which is great. But I think oftentimes that silos people into a way of thinking, and they're just thinking that they're always right, and they're always dealing with other people that have similar educational backgrounds and experiences.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Yeah. From a standpoint of writing, I think for sure I agree with that. But I think what impressed me most is that it isn't really a book about managing others. It's a book about communicating clearly, building trust with folks and creating accountability. That's what I like. And I've used this for years. I mean, I've used this for probably 2 decades, Mike. This has been my premise, is telling somebody what to do, showing them how to do it, having them demonstrate it, and following up. That's been my premise for how I manage folks for 2 decades. That's why this book is near and dear to my heart. I get it. Some of those lessons apply just as much to real estate investing as they do in their business. What do you think about that, Mike?
I agree. Eventually, every successful investor stops managing properties and starts managing people.
Yeah, true.
So investors who master leadership will outperform the ones who buy just simply more real estate.
Yeah, I agree. So, well,
what would you give?
I'm a little more biased. I like this book a little better because it's near and dear to my heart. I'd give it a 6 out of 10 because I have used some of these principles for decades, and I have to dance with the one that brought me. So these folks have got me a long way by learning some of these simple principles. So with that, I would give it a 6 out of 10. So awesome. Hey, thanks for joining us today on the Real Estate Investing Book Club podcast. If you liked it, subscribe and share with others. And once again, in the comments, let us know some books you'd be interested in hearing more about or us diving into. We'd love to hear back from you. Thanks for joining us today, and we appreciate you guys.
Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Investing Book Club podcast with your hosts, Chris and Mike.